what would you normally do? Because I've worked with boards also,
Yeah.
not as extensively as you have, and sometimes it's the old herding cats
Right.
issue. You know, how have you been able to try to get people to see how important it is to be able to be on the same page and focus on the overall good of the organization when there's a lot of different personalities and maybe different agendas?
Right. Well, when I was working with the accounting firms, you know, we had to work through the CFO, the CEO, maybe the human resources person, get the buy-in, and do the normal things you'd have to do. And even an audit firm has to kowtow to clients. Okay. Now, when I started working for the investors and the board members and the acquirers, what I found was I was able to come in from the top down rather than the bottom up. Because people, like you were talking about herding cats, there are so many different agendas and people resisting any kind of change or anything else that might affect you know, their particular silo, that it's just about impossible to get everybody to buy in. So what I found was that there are techniques where you come in not as a consultant but as a catalyst that represents the investor, or if it's looking at management, you represent the board. So what happens is you have to almost come in with some authority from a higher power, and that's usually tracking where the investment, where the money is. So when you come in with that, it just changes the nature of the engagement, so you're able to do more things. If you come in from the bottom up, then you have to talk about buy-in, you have to talk about going through layers and so forth, and each of those is like, you know, Dungeons and Dragons. It's almost impossible to get through, and when you're done, you're exhausted, and you still didn't get them to agree. On the other hand, if you're representing the investors, you say, go in there and figure out what's wrong and tell them, help them figure out what to do, and let's hold them to a 90-day time frame. That works a lot better.
Which is a dramatic, really a dramatic time period.
It is, because I used to frustrate myself trying to go through when we did these consulting assignments, trying to get buy-in, and you know, when you get 15, 20 people in the room, it's going to be a joke, and that's usually what happens, so it's frustrating. So if you come in with some authority, and usually it's based on the investors or the regulators that have that authority, you come in with that, and then the group really likes it, because then something gets done, because there's some authority behind it, not just, hey, we're going to come in here and do some team building.
Sure. So actually, some people may find that if they didn't like the initial recommendation or process at first, when they see the results, they actually can maybe move a little closer to your side.
Oh, exactly. And to what's right, it has to be done in a totality, holistic way, because you know you got all these complicated issues, and so you can get buried in one little issue, and that's what, and everything has to fit together, almost like a football team or you know a play. Everybody has to kind of fulfill their roles, and we don't have a lot of time nowadays to sit there and try to get everybody to buy into, you know, do you want to play football, do you want to be in the play?
Exactly. And you have one benchmark then, really, the results.
Yes, the results.
Everyone can see that.
The results.
Excellent. I understand, Larry, you've got a pretty revolutionary method of bringing about positive change very quickly. Could you share a little, maybe on the board? So
yeah, and somebody just prefaced, and this came about because when I was doing the executive search work, I had to come in and do these assignments very quickly. So we had like either a 30 or 90-day time frame. So we had to get in fast and have an initial impact. And we were watching how successful teams and executives really performed, and also we use an athletic model at the same time. So I'll show it to you, and it's like I'm in and out very quickly, and the clients love this, and we hand it over to them. And it's called kind of the What Are 5, as well as the 100% competent team. And I'll show you how this works and how we get everybody in the boardroom to see this, so we can move on to the next phase. But let me show you.
Thanks.
So one of the things is you always have like the investor at the top, and that could be the government or anybody else. And so the investor is in business, if you're not connected to the money stream, then all the projects you're going to be doing are kind of fragmented, okay? So we connect it to the investor, the donor, or the government. And so there was a survey done, about 10 years ago by Deloitte and Touche that basically said the board, this is 1,100 public companies, the board of directors has two major functions. One is performance, and this is performance through the CEO. And this means that the board, excuse me, we put the board here, excuse me, the board's here, they report to the investors, so the board is responsible for performance through the CEO. the hiring, the firing, the directing, the compensation, they all work through the CEO, and then the CEO has responsibility for his or her management group, usually maybe 5. And the board usually stays at this level, so they direct the CEO. The second role of the board is strategy. And this is nothing esoteric, it's basically what are the 5 or 6 strategic objectives that the company has, which are basically the results. Okay, so let's say for this company, they need to raise 50 million, an IPO, go international, make more acquisitions, and become number 3 from number 4 in their industry. So those are the 4 or 5 things that the executives and everybody around knows that that's what they're supposed to achieve as an organization. So it's real simple. And it goes back to that criteria we were talking about, winning results. Right. These are the winning results. So the board of directors is responsible for the performance of the organization through the CEO and for strategy. That means they approve it. The CEO with consultants can develop it, but the board of directors approves the strategy and they make sure that it's implemented, that it's executed. Okay, so those are the 2 main functions. Now, the way we look at this is, well, how are we doing? The investor is saying, hey, we're not getting the results that we want in these areas, so what could be the problem? Okay, so I would come in and make an assessment of, if your CFO, let's say she's been there for 6 months, she's doing great, she's taking companies public, she has a CPA, but she's still on a learning curve, so she's 70% effective going up, she's going to get better as she gets more trained. So she's very competent to make sure this happens, and maybe she has some international experience. You have the operations person managing 50, it's going to go to 200. He can't manage 4 people, so maybe he's 30% going down. Human resources has no international experience, so this person's maybe 31% going down. So you go through each of these key positions and you say, well, how good are they at achieving these results? Okay? Then in the aggregate, we may say that this whole group is 60% competent going down for the strategy. Okay? So what happens here then, this number becomes kind of the metric of metrics and gives us that benchmark of the performance not only of the CEO and his team, but it also gives us some idea of maybe the quality of the strategy. Maybe that's a too ambitious strategy since nobody's gone public or nobody's going international. And since that's the case, the 60% is really everybody's measure of effectiveness.
Sure.
So when you're doing consulting, the first thing you have to do is come up with where are we today that we all agree on, because the objective is to take this to at least 100% effectiveness. So what we do is we call this 60% the metrics of metrics, because the reason you may not be achieving this is because your team is maybe 60% effective at achieving these results. Or it could be that the board hasn't been effective at understanding the external issues, and that strategy may not be the right strategy, maybe too ambitious. Okay? So this is the first key, is to come up with something like this. And if a consultant really, after his assessment or her assessment, doesn't have anything, well, where are we now? Clearly, where are we now, and where are we going to go? How are you going to judge whether that consultant can hit the criteria? Okay? So then the other thing that we do real quick with this is we have something called the What Are 5, which is, we do this really quickly because the other part is with the boards, they don't have a lot of time, they don't have a lot of depth, so they want something that's simple but not simplistic. So they get this right away because they're the ones that gave the input on this, so that you have automatic buy-in because it's their input with my experience. So the What Are 5 real quick is, the W stands for winning. Are we winning before and after? So usually on this day we're not winning, we're only at 60%.